Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Padamamsa Parvajakacharya Astro Tarsata Shishimad. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Padamamsa Parvajakacharya Astro Tarsata Shishimad. Shringa Guru Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananti Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nam Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Brahmsiko Shri Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita, Gadadha, Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktavinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna, Gopi Gopinath, Shyamakund, Radhakund, Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Jamunamaya, Gangamaya Ki Jai, Their Divine Lordship, Shri Shri Rukmini Dorkadish Ki Jai, Their Divine Lordship, Shri Shri Jagannath Baladev, Shrimati Subhadra Ki Jai, Their Divine Lordship, Shri Shri Gauranitai Ki Jai. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtan Jaga Ki Jai. Transcendental Prasadam Distribution Ki Jai. Gaura Premananda Hare. All glories to the Sama devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the Sama devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the Sama devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the third canto, the status quo, and it's chapter 26, Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. We're on text number 8. And this phrase stuck out to me. Puruṣaṁ prakṛteḥ param. Puruṣam is the spirit soul, and prakrti is material nature, and param means transcendental. So that's basically what we're talking about, is the spirit soul, its relationship with material nature. It's actually transcendental to it. And I'll also be talking on a lecture Srila Prabhupada gave on this particular verse. It was given in Bombay in December 1974. And just a quick summary, Prabhupada, he says, we're naturally meant to be servants of Kṛṣṇa, but here in this material world, we got it backwards. We're trying to be the boss, the enjoyer, and it's like we're playing dress up, trying to pretend to be God. I'm just kind of summarizing in my own words. And he says now this desire to enjoy independently, it's what gets us tangled up in this material world. And it's like we've caught a disease. Actually, the body's a disease. And it's wanting to be the center of everything. And just like you catch a real disease, you got to deal with the symptoms. So Prabhupada gave this great example. He said, we're like criminals who decide they don't want to follow the government's laws. And then what happens? They end up in jail. So same with us. If we decide not to follow God's laws, then here we are in the material world. So this is the thing. We're not actually from here, but we're spiritual beings. We're just visiting this material world. It's like fish out of water. Or it's like we're trying to swim in an ocean. And we may be great swimmers, keeping ourselves afloat, but we're never really comfortable there. We won't be happy. So what's the solution? Prabhupada says that we need to stop trying to be the enjoyer of this material world. And remember that our real position is Krishna servants. So he says, even if you become the king of heaven, become a great demigod or something like that, you still have problems. But real happiness comes from surrendering to Krishna. And the fastest way to get there, Prabhupada tells us, is to engage in devotional service. It's that simple. So that's what this Vedic culture is all about, helping us remember our relationship with Kṛṣṇa. So let's dive into the verse. kārya-kāraṇa-kartṛtve kāraṇam prakṛtim viduḥ bhoktṛtve sukha-duḥkhānāṁ puruṣaṁ prakṛteḥ param kārya-kāraṇa-kartṛtve kāraṇam prakṛtim viduḥ bhoktṛtve sukha-duḥkhānāṁ puruṣam prakṛteḥ param kārya-kāraṇa-kartṛtve kāraṇam prakṛtim viduḥ bhoktṛtve sukha-duḥkhānāṁ puruṣam prakṛteḥ param. Puruṣam prakṛteḥ param kārya-kāraṇa-kartṛtve kāraṇam prakṛtim viduḥ bhoktṛtve sukha-duḥkhānāṁ puruṣam prakṛteḥ param. Anyone else? Okay, that's Vaishnavis. kārya-kāraṇa-kartṛtve kārya-kāraṇa-kartṛtim viduḥ bhoktṛtve sukha-duḥkhānāṁ puruṣam prakṛteḥ param. Kārya, the body. Kārana, the senses. Kartṛtve, regarding the demigods. Kāraṇam, the cause. Prakṛtim, material nature. Viduḥ, the learned understand. Bhoktṛtve, regarding the perception. Sukha, of happiness. Duḥkhānāṁ, and of distress. Puruṣam, the spirit soul. Prakṛteḥ, to material nature. Param, transcendental. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. The cause of the conditioned soul's material body and senses, and the senses presiding deities, the demigods, is the material nature. This is understood by learned men. The feelings of happiness and distress of the soul, who is transcendental by nature, are caused by the spirit soul himself. Purport. In the Bhagavad-gītā, it is said that when the Lord descends to this material world, he comes as a person by his own energy, ātma-māyā. He is not forced by any superior energy. He comes by his own will, and this can be called his pastime or līlā. But here it is clearly stated that the conditioned soul is forced to take a certain type of body and senses under the three modes of material nature. That body is not received according to his own choice. In other words, a conditioned soul has no free choice. He has to accept a certain type of body according to his karma. But when there are bodily reactions as felt in happiness and distress, it is to be understood that the cause is the spirit soul himself. If he so desires, the spirit soul can change this conditional life of dualities by choosing to serve Kṛṣṇa. The living entity is the cause of his own suffering, but he can also be the cause of his eternal happiness. When he wants to engage in Kṛṣṇa consciousness, a suitable body is offered to him by the internal potency, the spiritual energy of the Lord. And when he wants to satisfy his senses, a material body is offered. Thus, it is his free choice to accept a spiritual body or a material body. But once the body is accepted, he has to enjoy or suffer the consequences. The Māyāvādī philosopher's presentation is that the living entity enjoys his pastimes by accepting the body of a hog. This theory is not acceptable, however, because the word pastime implies voluntary acceptance for enjoyment. Therefore, this interpretation is most misleading. When there is enforced acceptance or suffering, it is not a pastime. The Lord's pastimes and the conditioned living entity's acceptance of karmic reaction are not on the same level. Jai. Om Gyana Timanandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshusumanitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitamena Bhutale Swayamupakadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Jai Shri Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Kṛṣṇa Hare Kṛṣṇa 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpa Tubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhavacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Okay, translation. The cause of the conditioned soul's material body and senses, and the senses presiding deities, the demigods, is the material nature. This is understood by learned men. The feelings of happiness and distress of the soul, who is transcendental by nature, are caused by the spirit soul himself. So this purport is really amazing. Just to kind of give you a little summary of it, to give you an idea. So we don't exactly get to choose our bodies. It's like we're in a cosmic lottery based on our past actions. So you see, when Kṛṣṇa decides to come to our world, he's completely in control. He can just say, I'm going to be a coward boy today, or I'm going to be Lord Vraha, or I'm going to be Nrsimha, lion. This is his fun, this is his līlā. But we're actually responsible for our own happiness and sadness. It's not the body. It's on us, the soul inside. But this is how it gets interesting, is that we have this choice. It's like choosing between a very expensive car like a Ferrari or a bicycle. Except when we choose things like this material body, it's a huge consequence. So once we pick it, as Prabhupada mentions, we're in for the ride, whether it's good or bad. It's like choosing, the roller coaster. Once you get on, you're strapped in, and you're going to go through all those hoops, ups and downs in this material world, screaming and suffering, and sometimes, laughing your head off too, but still you're suffering. So, but Prabhupada, he talks about this idea of the philosophers. They talk about enjoying being a pig, or whatever. And Prabhupada says, no, that's not how it works. He's telling that, it's not pastime when you're forced. So I guess a takeaway we could have here is that we have less free will than Kṛṣṇa. It's like obvious, but sometimes we're thinking we're Kṛṣṇa. But we're not totally powerless. Our choices, they actually matter big time. There's huge consequences. So it's all about making decisions that elevate us spiritually and not drag us deeper into this material mess. So Prabhupada makes a point about how comparing Kṛṣṇa coming to this material universe versus how we get our bodies. It's like the difference between, you say, like a VIP or a very famous person or a politician. He goes to visit a theme park, and he can go anywhere he wants. But the rest of us were just like dropped off, and we just get random rides. It's like that. So basically, we're responsible for our spiritual journey. Every choice is like a step on a staircase. And we're either climbing towards spiritual consciousness or sliding back down into this material world. So we have to ask ourselves, what is our next step? So we'll try to illustrate this more here, and then we'll just do a quick overview just to see what the chapter we're on, Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. And we're in this section. Verses 3 to 8 are very similar. It's kind of a theme there. Talking about jiva, prakriti, puruṣa, and the interactions and characteristics. So in verses 3 to 4, we've already read the Lord's interaction with prakriti and his pastimes and his will. It's kind of reiterated in the purport again of today's class. And then 5 to 8, the jiva's interactions with prakriti and how it leads to his bondage. So we don't have time to go into all the other sections there, but just to give you like a summary of this chapter, it's a very fascinating chapter. It's all about the universe, how it comes into being, and it's pretty amazing. It gives us a complete vision of what this universe is like and what our position is. It explains how God, Kṛṣṇa, he sets up this whole material world using his energies. And he's like an ultimate architect. It's like he desires it, but he empowers other living entities to be the engineers, like Lord Brahma and other of his creators and sub-creators like that, demigods. But he's the ultimate cosmic architect. And we as living beings, we get the chance to play in this grand creation. So this chapter, it talks about all the different 24 elements, how it makes up everything in the material world. It's like the periodic table, but it's on a cosmic scale. It's just amazing. And it's interesting how this chapter describes how God manifests his huge cosmic form called the Virat Purusha. And you could think of it as a universe in the shape of a person. Right? This is how it's described. And it's actually like a meditation on people in the beginning. But the key point is related to our verse today, is that saying, well, our bodies and senses, they come from this material nature, and our happiness and our sadness also, all that is on us. So we're spiritual beings at our core, but we're the ones causing our own joy and pain. So the chapter uses some really cool metaphors. And it compares the universe to a giant egg and different layers of the universe. They're like shells of the egg. And in that way, the cosmic form develops, and it's compared to a baby growing in the womb. So we show how there's different elements, and they're all different. One element is particular size, and then 10 times that is another element. It's all described. But I think the important part of this chapter is that it keeps hammering home, and that we really get this, is that we have to understand God and our place in this universe. And we need to practice devotional service. It's not just about intellectual understanding. It's about connecting with the divine through that service. So it's amazing how these ancient texts, they tackle the biggest questions about life and the universe. So that gives you just a quick summary about what the chapter is all about. So here we see, just visualizing some of the metaphors and analogies that are used. The material world is described as a cloud covering the spiritual sky. And you can see that huge cloud. So you can see like it's parted a little bit. It's like the sun peeking, but it's actually Kṛṣṇa. Krishna's glance, like that. So in the universe, it's compared to an egg, cosmic egg, all these different bubbles appearing. And see, the layers of the universe are likened to the shells of the egg. And the development of the cosmic form is compared to the growth of a child in the womb. So that's what these verses 3 to 8, they talk about this jiva, prakriti, purusha interactions. So the purusha is the Supreme Lord. He's the enjoyer, the controller. Prakriti is the material nature. It's the enjoyed. And the jivas, the living entities, they're meant to be enjoyers, but become entangled in the material world, forgetting that they're actually servants of Kṛṣṇa. So Kṛṣṇa's glance, we see here, this is how he impregnates the material nature with the living entities. And this begins the process of creation. So this is an interesting metaphor about the cosmic egg. And it's known as the Brahmanda. It's like Brahma's egg or a cosmic egg. And it's egg-shaped, supposedly like that. And it implies a finite but vast enclosed space. So you can see each universe, and some are bigger than others. And so we see the inner layers of that is the planetary systems. And all the other layers are made of water, fire, air, ether, ego, the Mahatattva. And each layer is 10 times thicker than the previous one. So that's the protective covering of the things like that. So this analogy just helps us illustrate the organic interconnection of nature and of the universe, its manifestation. So we can see here, just like it's actually, this is real, it's a real reality. We're seeing a vision of what this universe and this creation is like. So Bhagavad-gītā, there's a verse, aparam itas tu vidhi me prakṛtim param jiva bhutanam mahabāho. The living entities are my superior energy. And that's from the 7th chapter. And in the 15th chapter, there's another verse, says, Mabhai vamso jiva bhuta. The living entities are my parts and parcels. They're fragmental parts. And then also in that same chapter, he says, Manasastenrindiyani prakrtistani karshati. The living entities in the material world carries these different conceptions of life from one body to another, as airs carries aromas. So we see. So we just see, imagine the picture we see here. The soul is traveling through different bodies. Sometimes it's a fish, a tree, a dog, and finally a human being. And Prabhupada points out how when Kṛṣṇa comes to the material world, it's like his choosing to visit. He's got full control. He decides when to come, what form to take, and what to do. It's like the king deciding to tour his kingdom. So, but for us, it's a different story. We're more like passengers on a cosmic roller coaster. Our past actions, our karma, it determines what kind of body we're going to get next. So it's not really a choice we're consciously making. So you can see as it goes on. So Kṛṣṇa, as we said, he can step into any form with purpose and control, while we're being pulled along from body to body based on our past deeds. So it's very important for us to understand that we have to become responsible. Every choice we make now is shaping our future journey. And it's like we're painting the next picture in that series of bodies. And Prabhupada's saying, hey, wake up. Your choices matter. If we make spiritually conscious decisions, we're actually making a brighter future for ourselves. But if we keep chasing material desires, then we're just buying tickets for more rides on that karmic roller coaster. So when you look at this image, we see the soul's journey. And just see, you're the artist of your next life portrait. So you have to see, what kind of picture do you want to paint? So there's a couple more verses that Prabhupada refers to in his lecture. And here's one here. This is from the 7th chapter. Icha dvesa samutena dvanda mohena bharata sarvabhutani samoham sargayante parantapa. O sign of Bharata, O conqueror of the foe, all living entities are born into delusion, bewildered by dualities arisen from desire and hate. So this really, Prabhupada says, this is how we come into this material world, by this icha dvesa, desire and hate. And Prabhupada describes that more in his lecture. And then we'll go into the next verse here. This is the next verse. So, yesham tvantakatam papam jnanam punya karmanam te dvanda moha nirmukta bhajante mam drita vrataha. Persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, and whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, are free from the dualities of delusion, and they engage themselves in my service with determination. So this is very nice. This verse gives us hope, showing that we can overcome this illusion through our pious activities, by eradicating our sinful activities and engaging in Krishna's service. And in that purport in the Bhagavad-gītā, it talks about the importance of association with devotees and the process of gradual elevation through Krishna consciousness, and the role of devotees to actually help other devotees overcome this delusion. So the next verse, can you see it okay? We could chant it together if you want. So, Jaramana mokshaya mamashritya yantiye te brahmatad viduḥ Kṛṣṇam ātma-māyā. Intelligent persons who are endeavoring for liberation from old age and to death take refuge in me in devotional service. They're actually Brahman because they entirely know everything about transcendental activities. So this talks about those seeking liberation. They take refuge in Kṛṣṇa through devotional service, and they're considered to be Brahman. They understand transcendental activities. And in that purport, Prabhupada mentions how he talks about the difference between material and spiritual bodies and various levels of realization, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, and the superiority of Krishna consciousness over other forms. And then the last verse is Sadhi Bhuttadi Daivamam Sadhiyagnam Chaye Vidu Prayana Kalepi Chamam Te Vidur Yukta Chaitasaha. Those in full consciousness of me, who know me, the Supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of the material manifestation, of the demigods, and of all methods of sacrifice, can understand and know me, the Supreme Personality guided, even at the time of death. So that's the last verse in that chapter, and it talks about the highest level of Krishna consciousness. So this is the full awareness of Kṛṣṇa as the governing principle of everything. And we have to understand Kṛṣṇa's position in relation to the material world, the demigods and sacrifices, and our ability to remember Kṛṣṇa even at the time of death. And Prabhupada, in that purport, he talks about the gradual development of Kṛṣṇa consciousness through association, and how the opportunity is provided by human life to obtain Kṛṣṇa consciousness. And so this is why we have to have that conviction, the drita vrata, and that characterizes pure devotional service. So these verses are nice. They give us like a progression from the conditioned state of delusion to the highest state of Kṛṣṇa consciousness, and emphasizing again and again the role of devotional service and association with devotees on our journey. So here's that journey. So we're responsible for our journey. Every step we make is like a choice on a staircase. We're either climbing towards spiritual consciousness or sliding back down into the material world. So what's your next step going to be? So this is the concept of icha, desire, and dvesa, hatred. So it's two paths, and one leading to light and the other leading to darkness. So the process of purification is return to Kṛṣṇa. It's a multi-step path or ladder leading upwards. And then they have that's where original pure consciousness is, but it becomes covered by material nature, and it leads to this false identification with the body. And it results in our struggle in the material world. And that's the cause of our struggle, is misuse of our free will and the desire to enjoy separately from Kṛṣṇa, forgetting our eternal relationship with the Supreme. Another important verse Prabhupada mentions is this in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad-gītā. Dumanariyate vanir yatadarsho malena cha yato bhavena rito garbhas tatatena dam aritam. And the translation: as fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of lust. So this is describing another analogy of cleaning the mirror or purifying our consciousness. So the mirror of the mind, the consciousness is likened to a mirror. It reflects reality. But if there's dust on the mirror by the material conditioning, that's what it's described to be, the dust. It obscures the mirror's reflection. So we have to have the cleansing process, devotional service. It cleans the mirror, and then we have this clear reflection. We can, with this purified consciousness, it can reflect the spiritual reality. So this is a nice metaphor. It helps explain the spiritual practices that lead to clearer perception of reality. So this verse in purport, it talks about these 3 different analogies. First, it talks about fire covered by smoke. So we have this element fire, and it's covered by smoke, and it's considered to be the least covered state of the consciousness. And that represents the beginning stages of Kṛṣṇa consciousness in the human form of life. And so the fire is slightly perceivable through the smoke. So it's likened to our slight exhibition of Kṛṣṇa consciousness. And it indicates there's a potential for spiritual growth. And the human form of life actually gives us that chance to kindle that fire of spiritual life. So if we have to carefully handle that fire and make it into a blaze. And then another analogy is the mirror covered by dust. So this shows it's moderately, the consciousness is covered, and it represents like birds and beasts. And it refers that we have to cleanse the process, and there's various methods that are described. Chanting the holy names is the best process, and that's where the consciousness is more covered than in the human form of life, but it's not completely obscured. And then the last one is the embryo covered by the womb. And so this is a very heavily covered state of consciousness. It represents the trees and the plants. And it's compared to really a lack of consciousness or a very low consciousness. It's very much covered. And all these is due to lust. And there's different degrees of this lust that's described here. So the least is from the smoke, and then it goes more, and then from the fire, and then we have the mirror, and then we have the womb, like that. So that's all described there. Various forms. How we progress. So basically, in the mature world, we've forgotten who we are and our connection with Kṛṣṇa. But if we can just remember who we are, all the tools are given to us by Srila Prabhupada, how to break free from this whole mess. We have the process of Kṛṣṇa consciousness. He's given us devotional service. He's given us deity worship, the holy names, association. We have all the tools we need. So in that purport, in that lecture Srila Prabhupada gave on this verse, he uses the example of prakṛtiṁ and puruṣa, the subordinate and the enjoyer, of a relationship between husband and wife, the living entity and Kṛṣṇa. So this is how he explains it, that the concept of prakriti is supposed to be subordinate and puruṣa is the enjoyer. So the constitutional position, Prabhupada explains, is that we are prakriti, subordinate, like the wife in relationship to her husband. So this is the Vedic concept, is that there's no equal right of man and woman. The woman is always subordinate. That is the Manusamhita law. So a woman does not desire to get independence. And this is protection. Prabhupada talks about that if the woman remains under the protection, in her young age, the father, and when she's young, under her husband, and when she's old, under her children. So she's in a very safe position. So Prabhupada quotes some examples from scripture. Kunti, even though she wasn't an ordinary woman, still she kept herself under the protection of her 5 sons. And then Sita, when Ramchandra was going to the forest, Ramchandra didn't ask her to come. Or did Sita's father ask her to come? But she preferred to go with Ramchandra just to be protected by him. So this is how we apply this to our spiritual life. This analogy is our relationship with Kṛṣṇa. So we're prakriti. Our business is to remain an eternal servant of Kṛṣṇa, and then we'll be happy. Otherwise, it's not possible. So in the mature world, we have the mentality that, we have to give this up, that how we're constitutionally, we think we're the enjoyer, and we want to declare our independence. But that's not being under the protection of Kṛṣṇa. But that's what it's like in the mature world. You're under no protection. So when we try to become the enjoyer, the puruṣa, and instead of the enjoyed, prakriti, we become entangled in material nature and we suffer. So what's the solution? Is that we have to return to this original position as prakriti in relationship with Kṛṣṇa. So that's how we get a happy life. So this analogy is really nice, Prabhupada gives. It helps us illustrate how our constitutional position is subordinate to Kṛṣṇa, and the protection and happiness comes from accepting that position, and the problems arise if we try to reverse the relationship. So it's important for us to return to our original position if we really want true happiness. So Prabhupada's really genius how he uses this, that this familiar relationship we have, it helps make this abstract concept of a relationship with Kṛṣṇa more understandable and relatable. And then we see here the analogy that we mentioned about the ocean. A person struggling to swim in rough waters versus someone who is safely on the shore. So this material world is like the struggle, in the ocean, trying to keep ourselves afloat. How can we be happy? So Prabhupada used this also in his lecture. So the ocean, we know, represents the material world or material existence. It's vast, it's deep, it's turbulent, and it's very dangerous. And the swimmer, it's a living entity, the conditioned soul, and he's struggling to stay afloat. So the swimming, he's trying to swim. That's his struggle for existence. It's a constant exertion to keep oneself above the water, trying to stay afloat. That's our temporary material achievements. Just temporarily staying afloat. No matter how good a swimmer one is, you can't stay in the ocean indefinitely. So that's our exhaustion. It comes. We realize the futility of this material endeavors. And eventually, even if you're the best swimmer, you're going to tire. You're going to get tired, and there's a risk of drowning. And then the shore, it represents spiritual life or Kṛṣṇa consciousness. And that's our goal. That's our safe haven. And that's what the swimmer has to reach. So getting out of the water is our liberation. And that's what the method is, to accept help from someone already on the shore, or someone above, like here. We get the help from the devotees. And we see this is what Srila Prabhupada came. He came into this material world to help deliver us from this ocean. So he taught us the futility of struggling. How no matter how expert you are, gives us the danger of the material world, how we get a false sense of security, you see. So we need help from other people, and this is what Prabhupada came with the boat, to give us this true relief of coming from this material world. There's that verse, Bhagavad-gītā, Māmeva ye prabhajante, Māyāme tam tarantite. Those who surrender to me can easily cross beyond this illusion. That's the quickest way to happiness, is to pray to Kṛṣṇa for deliverance. And Lord Chaitanya showed us how. Ainanda tanuja patitam kinkaram, mam vishame bhavam buddho. O son of Maharaj, of Nanda Maharaj, I am your eternal servant, but I have fallen into this terrible ocean of birth and death. So this is, we see in the material world, from the highest to the lowest. It's a place where there's repeated birth and death. So this is the last slide. We could see the difference between devotees and non-devotees. We see the contrasting images, some people wasting time in their illusion and aggression, this icha, dvesa, desire and hate. So we talked about the problem and the solution. So now it's time to take action. So let's dive into devotional service. That's the first thing. And hearing and chanting about Kṛṣṇa, serving his deity form, hanging out with, awesome devotees, pure devotees, who actually have been through this process and have figured it out. And then next, we break free from these material chains. And remember, the chains is all this stuff around us. It's temporary. So if we practice the regulated principles of Kṛṣṇa consciousness, and we serve Kṛṣṇa instead of our senses, then we'll get free from this chain. And one big thing is that we have to try to see Kṛṣṇa in everything, the super soul in everything. He's there in your heart. If we meditate on it, if we understand our relationship with it, we can align our actions with it. So that's the ultimate goal, is Kṛṣṇa consciousness. It's about rediscovering who we really are and rekindling that eternal loving relationship with Kṛṣṇa. So are we ready to get out of this merry-go-round, this great ride in this material world? So this is what we have to do, is reclaim our spiritual identity. And that's what we have to do. It's interesting how, they say just do it. And then if you've listened to the wisdom of the sages, Raghunath says, come on, let's go, let's do it. So this is and what happens when you become clear? You have a vision, you know where you're going, and then you can help others. You can enlist others in this vision. You have the vision and you could give it to them. not followers, but actually collaborators. And this is what Prabhupada made. He just didn't want followers, but collaborators who actually want to share this vision, spread it out, empower people, enlist others, to actually make a difference in the world. And this is what we need to endure with persistence, dedication, like that. So there's challenges, there's problems, but we could maintain our focus even when things get tough by association with the devotees and following the processes. So this is it. Jai. So, come on. Any comments, questions, realizations? Thank you. Okay, well, thank you for your kind attention. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada.